Hello and welcome back to the Argyle CIO Leadership Forum. My name is Vicki Lynn with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our moderator for this session. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsor's virtual booth at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during the event, you can visit the virtual booth from the main agenda page, and that does include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. To ask questions throughout this session and all sessions, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Also, be sure to subscribe to Argyle on YouTube for exclusive access to all of our past events. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Megan Williams, Global Transformation Portfolio and Program Lead at TransUnion. One of our panelists is unable to join us today. However, we are so excited to have Megan and Rob with us for a fireside chat discussion titled AI, Automation, and Cloud, Smart Strategies for 2025 and Beyond. Welcome, Megan, and over to you.
Yeah, hi, morning, evening, everybody, wherever you are. Thanks, Vicky, for that introduction. Yeah, excited to be here to talk about AI, automation, and cloud, especially with Rob, who's going to be our resident AI expert for the next hour. So, Rob, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Megan. Happy to join you all today. My name's Rob Zelinka. I've spent the last 8 years as the CIO for Jack Henry. Jack Henry is one of the significant service providers in the financial services realm. Most recently, I continue to serve our communities through board advisory work, but also through LinkedIn and through my YouTube channel. You can reach me there on those two mediums.
Okay, thanks, Rob. So let's dive in. So I was reading that the global AI market is projected to reach over 407 billion by 2027, which is only 2 years from now. And that sectors like healthcare and retail are already reporting up to 30% reductions in diagnostic errors, which is incredible. I mean, that's a third of diagnostic errors being reduced, as well as 3 times increases in customer engagement. So, Rob, my first question to you is, what AI automation use cases are currently delivering the most business value? Like there we've spoken about retail and healthcare, but which other sectors, or are these the sectors that are delivering the most business value across the industries? And what factors consistently drive their success?
I appreciate the question, Megan. So I'm going to speak from the context of what I've experienced recently in the financial services realm. So to start, I'll say AI is driving intelligent document processing, fraud detection, AI-driven customer support engagements are also being enhanced from a compliance and cost efficiency perspective. As an illustration of that, JP Morgan Chase has a platform called Coin, which is they have shared is saving them hundreds of thousands of hours by automating their legal reviews. At the same realm, AI is automating what is commonly referred to as KYC, or Know Your Customer. So what you'll see there is AML workflows are also being enhanced through the usage of AI, and that's driving improved compliance, and that also, of course, reduces manual review cycles. Now, let's go a little deeper into this. Let's talk about the areas where I have seen the most success organizationally, and it starts with people. So the first thing I would tell you is to have clear business alignment on what the problems are that you're trying to solve, and make sure that your strategic goals are tied there. Because if they're not, you're misaligned right from the get-go, and you're really just undertaking a tech project. The second area that I think is critically important is you must maintain some rigor around data, or what I refer to as data excellence, which means you have high quality, well-governed data, which is going to fuel all of your AI goals and objectives. Without that, even the best models are going to stall and likely fail to deliver the outcomes. And I'll leave you on this precipice with this comment. There is no AI without data. Data is foundational for driving your AI efforts. couple other areas I think that are incredibly important, Megan. Scalability and flexibility. Having winning use cases starts with what I call small wins. They're designed to get some momentum, but that momentum must scale over time and deliver consistent results across your enterprise. In order to be successful, you must have leadership buy-in. You're not going to be able to achieve success unless your executives are unilaterally sponsoring and supporting your efforts to ensure that you have cross-functional consistency across your organization. And the last point I'll make that is critically important is maintain a continuous feedback loop. Successful AI systems evolve with user input and then evolve with the needs of the business and how they're changing, how the marketplace is changing.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. And I feel like you've touched on a lot there that's truly interesting about like the failure of AI projects. And I think especially initially as a lot of companies are going into this, like, what does this mean for us? How do we make this work for us? You know, another statistic that I read is that 50% of AI projects are currently failing. Now, I think that's something we'd expect for where we are in this AI journey. But that article specifically spoke about things like data silos and outdated APIs, because we've got, 70% of enterprises are still on this legacy infrastructure. They've got performance bottlenecks, etc. And then we're bringing in AI, and the projects tend to fail because of this friction between the legacy systems, the data silos, etc. that you already spoke about. So where do you think organizations are encountering the most friction when they're integrating the AI, say, into the legacy applications or into existing workflows? And how do you see them overcoming these hurdles?
Well, let me start with this premise, Megan. AI integration isn't just a technical upgrade, and I think you have to start with that premise. Oftentimes, technologists look at technology as a project. If we take that as at face value, we need to then expand ourselves, and that's where our leadership comes in. We need to treat these as cultural and architectural reckonings or opportunities, because that's exactly what they are. There's a lot of anxiety right now around AI, and what we need to do as leaders is create an atmosphere of psychological safety where people can understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, meaningfully participate. Where I see the friction, and this is towards the back end of your question, is it doesn't just lie in necessarily the promise of AI, but in the reality of the legacy systems that you talked about. And frankly, these legacy systems were never built to scale or adapt for collaboration. In fact, in the banking realm, they weren't even built to support the internet. That's how old some of these systems are. So from my experience, leading any type of large-scale enterprise initiative, what I found drives the highest value is to use technology, in this case AI, as a teammate to automate efforts and wherever we can. So there's a couple of key elements or foundational components that I found that are successful. First, they must be anchored to a business outcome. Ultimately ask, what problem are we here to solve for? The best use cases solve problems. Those problems could be improving safety, reducing risk, growing revenue, improving net promoter scores, NPS scores. We don't start with the tech because it's neat, it's exciting, it's interesting. We start with the need. That's foundational. The second thing that I will share, and again, going back to my point on data, you must have a strong data foundation. As I shared before, there is no AI without data. Data must be clean. It must be readily available. It has to be governed in a way, because that data is the lifeblood of everything that you're trying to accomplish here. The next thing, and never lose sight of this, all of what we're trying to do is built around improving the human experience. And the heart of a human experience is nothing more than, or nothing less than, people. So successful AI starts with those people. It's not designed to replace the people, but enhance the people. Mm-hmm. And I'll give you what my team had referred to as a Robism. I use technology as a teammate. It's there to help and enhance the human to human interaction, which means we must consider having humans in the loop at all times. That's humans in the loop at the design phase. It's humans in the loop at the QA or testing phase, user acceptance phase, and it's human in the loop to ensure that the outcomes that we're trying to strive for are driven consistently. They pass muster with exams and audits and all the regulatory things that we have. And let me leave you with one last thing from a foundational perspective here. The scale that we're looking for is, you have to think about this from an overarching platform perspective, which means it's going to evolve over time. I tend to treat every proof of concept like a potential product, meaning I need to know, can I operationalize it? Can I deliver it consistently so that a user experience is consistent across the board? We must build with a reusability mindset, apply responsible governance and standards for things like API integrations, observability, and that needs to be done from step one.
Love it. I especially like that quote of not replacing but enhancing human interactions. I think that's really key because I think, if we don't put people at the forefront of what we're doing, then you are going to fail because the AI needs to serve what the people need. So I think one of the things that's very obvious as well when we see the billions that are being invested into like data servers and farms is that AI requires cloud for scalability. When these large language models start to run, they need to be able to scale quickly, and that's going to require a cloud. So with that, we've got 80% of enterprises now operating across multiple public clouds. But they are facing issues of costs. I know even here at TransUnion, we've seen a huge increase in costs as we go into the cloud because that governance really needs to be in place around what you're running in the cloud, when you're running it in the cloud, and how you're scaling that. We're also seeing obviously 2.8 times more security incidents due to lots of this tool sprawl. The cloud's meant to help us with that security, but I think with the speed that companies are trying to move towards AI, move into the cloud, that security can become an issue. So how do you think companies are managing with this complexity today, with the multiple cloud, with the security, as well as they go into this AI world?
Yeah, so you're absolutely spot on that a cloud, if you will, is foundational for the execution and delivery of an AI strategy, of a data strategy. To that end, most companies have a multi-cloud environment, whether that's infrastructure as a service through one of the traditional hyperscale providers, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, or it's consuming a platform as a service or software as a service from Salesforce, ServiceNow, Workday, Oracle, SAP, etc. What I will say is multi-cloud is not a tech choice. It's a business strategy. And usually that business strategy is around providing business agility, flexibility. With flexibility comes the opportunity for friction. The real challenge isn't in necessarily using multiple clouds or integrating multiple clouds. It's how you manage them consistently. So that way you're managing with cost effectiveness in play. You can pass rigor with audits and exams. Again, most of us are in regulated industries, and there's no shortage of people that are coming in and wanting to ensure that we're doing all that we must be doing to protect sensitive data. I'm going to respond in a similar way. I often break things down at a very basic level, and I create foundations or pillars that lead to good operational hygiene. It just like every day, most of us get up and we go through a regimen. We get out of bed, we shower, we brush our teeth, we comb our hair, we get our coffee, whatever gets us energized. To run operationally, you need to have rigor. The first thing I look at is embracing a FinOps mindset. And I will tell you again, this is another one of those cultural elements. Mm-hmm. Consider embedding financial accountability into your workflows right from the very beginning. That is including of real-time dashboards, chargeback models, minimally showback models, Figure out where your workloads are going to be placed. Do they go in a cloud, a hybrid cloud, a private cloud, public cloud? You have to figure that out really early on. Make sure there's accountability at the product group level. What I found is when the product group owns the cost, they're more interested in managing the cost. When the central IT organization owns the cost, they don't have as much interest because they're not accountable for managing to a plan. I'll give you a corny example. Years ago, my daughter, who had graduated from high school, was very excited for me to meet a boy. She wanted me to join them at dinner. I know for all of you dads and parents out there, this will resonate. She wanted me to pay for her and her boyfriend to go to dinner. I said, I would love nothing more than to join you for dinner. And she had it all planned out. We were going to Morton. They were going to Morton's of Chicago. Very, very good restaurant. Megan, you're from Chicago. You've probably been there. You can relate. Let me bring it to conclusion. She didn't want me to go to dinner. She just wanted me to meet them, but she wanted me to pay for the dinner. So when it became clear that the only way I was paying for dinner at Morton's of Chicago is if I was joining, then we pivoted, and I ended up giving her $50, and she enjoyed dinner at Lone Star Steakhouse, which is good in its own right, but probably a little different. The point being here is there needs to be accountability. The people that are making the decisions need to be paying the bills. And if they are invested on both ends of it, there's a stronger likelihood that they're going to pay attention. The next area that's incredibly important is having some unified management platform. I like to use vendor neutral tools because I want that agility. I want to be able to pivot my hyperscale play from maybe Microsoft to Amazon or Amazon to Google. And I want to know that the tools, and I'll give you one, for example, that I'm really fond of. I'm fond of Morpheus. These help to create an atmosphere where you can manage from a central perspective, things like policy enforcement, cost tracking, performance monitoring, no matter which cloud you choose. Another pillar or element that I think is incredibly important is to embrace an infrastructure as code mindset. So again, I'll throw another tool out there. I'm very fond of open source tools like Terraform. These tools enable consistent deployments of your CI/CD pipelines. They reduce drift risk. So, when you have different servers and environments, you want to ensure you have consistency, because consistency means it's easier to manage. If it's easier to manage, it's easier for you to articulate to an examiner or a regulator, and it puts them at ease. And then, of course, foundationally for all of that, it simplifies governance across any and all providers. Two other areas, incredibly important pillars, I think, for this. Federate your identity and access management. So I'm going to speak now to the CISOs, the security-focused persons in the audience. And by the way, whether you are a CISO or not, security is all of our responsibility. So when you think about single sign-on, identity and access management solutions, so these are solutions like Okta, for example, or minimally Azure AD, make sure you're streamlining access across all of the various parts of your environment, which will ultimately reduce your attack surfaces and keep the bad guys at risk so that they don't have an ability for lateral movement. And then lastly, I think, again, going back to strategic workload distribution, I think is essential. We have to think about placing workloads based on a number of factors: cost, latency, compliance requirements. Using AI to drive that placement decisioning will help to optimize our performance and ultimately our spend.
Okay, that is really interesting. I hadn't thought about using the AI for that workload placement. I think that is very powerful, because the costs and the control of those costs, I totally agree with you. If the accountability is at the wrong level, then the spend just skyrockets, and it's with the cloud, it skyrockets quickly. It's not something. The dam waters have broken, and you need to get that wall fixed very quickly. So that's really interesting. Thanks, Rob. So Accenture reports that only 8% of companies have successfully scaled strategic AI initiatives. I think that makes sense because they're saying that the other 92% are still in pilot mode. That makes sense to me. I feel like where I am, we're very much in pilot mode. We are more of a legacy company. I think startups are obviously more less on that kind of trying to convert from legacy to what does AI mean for us. But what do you think distinguishes organizations that have moved beyond that experimentation to enterprise-wide AI adoption? Um, and what lessons do you think we can draw from those successes?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. So I would submit to you that most times we start with the premise that a successful AI, a scaled AI implementation is built around having the latest models. I want to counter that. And I would submit to you that we must not lose sight of a concept that it's more than just having the latest and greatest models. It's about having, and we talked a little bit about legacy infrastructure, tech debt. We have to have the right infrastructure in place. We have to have the leadership commitment, which I alluded to earlier. But most importantly, we have to have the right mindset, remembering what problems we're here to solve, what are our strategic imperatives or our hills to die on, the things that no matter what happens, we're committed to. You know, when we get budget cuts, we're still committed to this. When we find out we're acquiring another company or divesting a part of our business, we're still going to ensure that these things get done. You had mentioned the 8% who have moved beyond pilot. I would submit the 8% have embedded into their DNA some of the following. First, let's start with what the problem is that we're solving and focusing on that and not the model. As I alluded to earlier, AI doesn't solve a real business point necessarily on its own. On its own, it's potentially a distraction. Minimally, it's noise. So people that are in that 8%, these are scalers that have anchored their initiatives to a measurable and deliverable outcome. If you're not measuring, you have no idea what success looks like. You have no idea how to measure unless you define success. To that end, map your workflows before buying any tools. Our urge, our temptation, the people that report up to us, they are excited by shiny objects, cool tools. That's great. But I would submit to you that leaders need to be auditing tasks to determine what should be automated, what should be augmented, what can be accelerated with AI. This is going to help us to avoid the pitfalls associated with just a blind mandate. Next element, critically important, no matter what we're doing in these transformational efforts, build consistent feedback loops into the system from the very, very beginning. AI systems that learn from user behavior and evolve over time tend to outperform those static point-in-time solutions that have been implemented. And then lastly, here's what I would say. Launch with intentional scale from the very beginning. Remembering in a previous question I responded, I treat everything as if this is a go live product down the road, not just a proof of concept. Some leaders will advocate for an organizational rollout to normalize usage, drive consistent outcomes, accelerate adoption across the enterprise. And of course, when that's paired with exceptional governance, it seems easy. That said, there is no one size fits all. So what works for one organization may not work for another organization. The people that are on this call in this virtual room with us, they know their culture best. Take into consideration what works best for your culture. And that might be an approach that is a small, quick win type solution that you know can scale to support all other parts of your business, or it might be a big bang cutover. Don't lose sight of what your culture will accept and what your risk appetite is.
Yeah, and I think the culture thing goes back to your very first point, and that is like, what is the problem we're trying to solve? Because often I think I feel like people come to you, like you said, with like, I want this tool, it's going to solve like a whole lot of issues. But when you go through it, some of the issues are process. It's not the tool, right? If you've got a process problem, the tool might force the process to what you want it to be. But let's discuss, like, I love that you said mapping those workflows and then like automate, augment, or accelerate. I like that you've got those three channels really, and you're kind of working through those workflows and really thinking through like the automation, the augmentation, and then the acceleration. I think that's really key, and being very intentional. I do feel like there's this shiny object, whether it's a tool, and certainly now with AI, that people are running after. But what are they trying to really solve? And there's a lot that can be solved, right? I think there's a huge benefit to a lot of the AI that I use on a daily basis. That's definitely helped streamline a lot of what I need to do. Um, okay, so we've got about 20 minutes left. I've got one more question, but I was going to kick it over to see if there were any questions. I see in the Q&A there aren't any at the moment, but I don't know if anyone has any questions. We'll take a pause if you do want to start adding some questions to the Q&A. Okay, Nia's got one, which is good. Okay, so Nia's first question is, how can a project manager make sure that the target date is AI ready, i.e. that it's tagged properly? One of my favorite questions with my project managers is, what does that date mean? So how do we ensure that the target date is AI ready, Rob?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. It goes back to having good data hygiene. Uh, Garbage in, garbage out, we often say. So the first effort must be to make sure that we have the right data. It's clean data. It's relevant data. It's accurate data. It can be reached quickly because there's nothing worse than needing data, not having it, and then someone comes to you 3-4 days later. Oh, I have the data, the report you're looking for. Great, everything's changed now. I want to empower every single person, no matter what their title or role is. We check egos, titles at the door. So PMs are just as valuable. Project managers, program managers are just as valuable as architects, as CIOs, CIOs, CTOs, CDOs, etc. That's where I would start.
Fantastic. Thanks, Rob. Okay, the next question we have is, how are you leveraging AI and automation to not only improve efficiency, but also create new value for customers and employee? And I think
I
the
love
efficiency is part of the employee piece, but yeah.
Yeah, I love the question. So at the heart of what we're trying to do here is we're trying to improve and or create experiences, user experiences, employee experiences. Where I think there's tremendous opportunity is with contact centers, for instance. So think of it from this context. You're managing and operating a fraud center. You're at dinner, Megan, you're enjoying an evening, you get a text from presumably your bank that they want to validate some recent charges. I would imagine your blood pressure goes up a notch. You're now distracted from the conversation. You're trying to ascertain, is this real? Is this someone attempting to perpetrate fraud on me? So you inquire with your credit card provider. You come to find out after a series of questions that perhaps you have been a victim of fraud. Now your blood pressure and heart rate have elevated. Wouldn't it be great if the person on the other end of the phone had all of the relevant information they need to do a couple things? First, understand what is happening. Once you understand, you can have empathy. And I can now use that information to calm you, Megan, to say, Megan, I know this is a less than ideal situation, but I'm here. I'm empowered to serve you, to help you, to drive the right outcome, because I have everything I need in front of me. I know who you are. You have validated who you are. So I've done a posture assessment on you. That's a tremendous use case. Another use case is augmenting the human. So think of it this way. I'm going to go back to technology as a teammate again. Oftentimes we're busy, we're multitasking. From an associate or employee experience perspective, we go out to these large repositories of data. They have policies, how-to narratives. The data is stale in many cases. It's not even relevant anymore. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to quickly be able to get to where I need to go? Something simple like, how much vacation or PTO time do I have in my bank? That could ordinarily be a 10 or 15-minute frustrating event. Wouldn't it be great if that information could be delivered to you in 10 or 15 seconds?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, of course, managing risk. So I talked a lot about the appetite we have for risk, the climate in the regulated environments with exams, regulators, all the requirements there. AI is a spectacular tool to automate those reviews that go on in a manual effort that are very time consuming, very labor intensive.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks, Rob. There's another question which I find very interesting because I feel like I can answer half of it in terms of what we're doing at TransUnion, but the second piece is the piece where we really struggle. So Nishant is asking what strategies you use when you're modernizing a legacy system while you're still trying to maintain your business continuity and minimize disruption. And for us at TransUnion, we're going through this large modernization program, and we've always said, like, we separate the run versus the build. Run being your BAU, keep the lights on, business continuity, etc. And then the build is our modernized program. And we've been good at separating those and they're huge teams, but those two areas. And prioritizing run, like keep the lights on is always going to be your priority. If there's a production outage or issues or compliance things that need to be enhanced, we do that. So that helps minimize disruption. I think where we struggle though is where the modernization is taking 2 years and we have customer enhancements that are coming in, and we'd ideally like to wait and build those enhancements into the modernization piece as opposed to building that on your legacy system as well as in your modernization roadmap, etc. And I think that's the piece that we struggle with the most. But I'm interested, Rob, like what strategies would you suggest to kind of maintain that business continuity, be able to create those enhancements and serve your customers while you're still going through a modernization or transformation?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question, and thank you for providing the foundation for me to respond. So, my last 8 years have been spent in financial services. Prior to that, I spent an enormous amount of time in healthcare. In between, I spent time in the logistics realm. The heart and soul of almost every one of those back offices was a big iron device from IBM, a mainframe. An I series, a Power series, AS400, whatever. They keep changing the names, but the boxes are still fundamentally the same. Those devices were never built for the modern era. Certainly weren't built for AI, weren't even built for the internet. And we've found ways to adapt them. Megan, you said something that was critically important. What energizes most of us isn't the manage and operate or the keep the lights on efforts. Those are essential. What motivates and energizes us is all these transformational efforts. Our business and our clients do not care about how successful those are if the day-to-day operations is inconsistent, unreliable. We cannot take our eye off of the ball there. The manage and operate is table stakes for running a business. And so today, get comfortable with the fact that we are on a transformational journey. We are going to have a foot in both ponds, the legacy pond and the modern pond. And those are going to coexist for some time. Resist every urge and temptation to subscribe to a one-size-fits-all.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, we're going to move everything to a hyperscale provider. It doesn't matter who they are, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, or IBM, Oracle. I can go on. There is very seldom a one-size-fits-all. We have to build to integrate, which is why your middleware and API strategy is incredibly important. When you think about the user experience, what is closest to the user, it's usually on a mobile device. Mm-hmm. It's a mobile experience. It's fresh, it's quick, it's consistent. But the back end could potentially, and most likely it has a lot of elements of legacy in the mix. We
Right.
have to find a way to make them both coexist with one another.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And then going back to what I said at the beginning, and this relates to the next question in the Q&A, is the global AI market is projected to reach 407 billion by 2027, which is 2 years from now. And the question is around, how do we see that relationship between generative AI, automation, and cloud evolving over the next 2 to 3 years? Like that 407 billion by 2027 means we're going to evolve fairly quickly over the next 2 to 3 years. But how do we see that relationship between AI, the automation, and the cloud coming together and coexisting in those 3 years?
Yeah. Wow. That's a really good question. So there's a crystal ball here. I'm going to read it to the best of my ability. First, let me say, in this case, AI maturity, it's more than just a framework. And so I've been talking a lot about frameworks and pillars. Those are great for governing, they're rails for us to operate within. As I mentioned before, what we're dealing with here is a mindset shift, a cultural evolution. That is at the heart of it. The most forward-thinking technology teams are not chasing tools alone. How many of us have invested in tools only for us not to see them deliver a return on investment, or worse, they sit on a shelf and someone will come to us and say, hey, Rob, hey, Megan, I need an observability tool. Okay, you mean like the one we bought 2 years ago that we're not fully implemented? What's different about this? How about we get value out of what we've already invested in?
Yeah.
At the heart of what we're doing, Megan, we aren't architecting systems. What we're architecting is agility, resiliency, and most importantly, trust. Trust with our peers, trust with our stakeholders, our boards, our clients, and the communities we serve. When I think of this from a foundational perspective, in order to kind of get these things aligned, driving AI and cloud convergence must be centered and anchored around business outcomes. I'll go back to what problems are we trying to solve? And then once we've defined those, then we embed AI, cloud into the fabric, in this case, our business process. And that's not going to be around isolated tools that solve a point in time need, but these tools now become enablers for that business process refinement that's aligned to a business strategy and ultimately an outcome. And so ultimately, we're going to make decisions around hyperscale providers, how those hyperscale providers differentiate, can accelerate, all of those experiences we're trying to create. At that point, now we can invest in what I call the ILITY approach: scalable, secure, modular architectures that from the onset are modernized. They support native cloud delivery, and they support it at the base level. This allows us to experiment faster, fail faster, learn from the failure so we can apply what we've learned, so we can grow and move forward. Next thing we need to do is we need to bridge gaps between technology teams and business teams. One of the things that I jump on almost all the time when I hear it from my teams is they tend to, and they're well-intended. They don't mean any ill will by it, but what they'll say is, well, the business wants this. Hold on, you're the business.
Right.
By saying the business, you're driving a wedge between us and them,
Right.
between you and them. We are in this together. Highly mature organizations have empowered cross-functional teams to blend business knowledge and acumen with domain knowledge and acumen. Ultimately, this is going to ensure that the investments we're making, whether they be in AI or cloud, are directly tied to measurable value. That's the key. What value are we getting? That's the return on investment scale. And it will also help us to manage things that are impactful to our business, like customer churn. It will help us to increase our throughput, our efficiencies. It'll help us to accelerate our innovation cycles because we have everyone singing out of the same hymn book, so to speak. We're speaking the same language. I'll close with this on this question. We cannot determine what success looks like if we haven't defined it, we haven't established metrics, we haven't monitored and reported against it. That's the secret sauce for me, Megan.
Yep, totally agree. And I think that ways of working in those cross-functional teams is, I think, really is the only way we're going to be successful, especially in this journey, and especially with wanting to be agile and wanting to be able to move quickly. You totally have to have that team together and being accountable together, right, with the business and that domain knowledge. I think that's super key. Okay, well, we're running out of time, but we're going to go to one last question that Danny was asking, which was sort of a statement that he wanted confirmed, but he's saying there's really not a good one-size-fits-all solution. However, simplifying and consolidating is a commendable effort. What do you say to that statement, Rob?
First, thank you, Danny, for the question. Secondly, I agree. So here's what I will say. When I say there's no one size fits all, it's good to listen to our peers and learn from others, but we have to maintain some level of perspective. What works for one organization or group of people or even a marketplace may not work for another. We must, though, establish what I call some non-negotiables, meaning, and it's usually around governance, the framework, things that will be consistent from business unit to business unit, from product group to product group. Those are foundational frameworks. Things like which tools. I most recently struggled because every business unit wanted to pick the tool that made them feel warm and fuzzy. So we had 12 tools that essentially did the same thing. Well, the cost modeling for that is enormous. The amount of complexity, data drift, data leakage, all risks. So those are some of those non-negotiables that I was alluding to, Megan and Danny, of course. We're going to have to establish what tools can be used, won't be used, and to that end, let's just say, for example, and I personally experienced this, there was a specific AI tool that almost everyone gravitated to. It was the most expensive of the tools. We had these other tools that were part of a bundle because we consumed other services, where this preferred tool was the one that had the highest cost structure because it wasn't bundled with any other product. And so it occurred to me, we had to either influence behavioral change or embrace the fact that this tool that everybody wants we must find a way to fund the tool and integrate it into our work streams and our workflows. Because I, in this case, would get no value out of telling the masses, yep, we know this is the tool you want, but you're not going to be able to use it. You're going to use this tool instead.
Right.
They will either find a way to use the tool they want and circumvent and run the risk of circumventing and putting the company at risk, or they'll just leave the company and go somewhere where they can use the tool that they want to use, that they believe gives them the best opportunity to drive the outcomes that they've been tasked with.
Yep, totally makes sense. Okay, with that, we're pretty much at time. So thanks very much, Rob. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I've learned a lot. Vicky, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Megan and Rob. What a wonderful discussion. That was so insightful, lots of practical, good information. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for this session today. And as a reminder, this session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. And our next session will begin at 12:25 p.m. Eastern Time. And that will be a thought leadership titled Reimagining the Economics of IT through Agentic AI Transformation. Please click on the join button that will appear on your screen to be directed to that session. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you again, Megan and Rob.
Thank you. Goodbye,
Thank
everybody.